Okay, I'm almost 10 minutes in this video and I haven't even started making a song. So let's change that. We're gonna make a song in this video. Yeah. So a lot of songs that I make, a lot of the styles I make, I feel there's mainly four main things you need to know in song making: the drums, the bass, the melody, and the vocals. Those are the four components of a song that I personally feel would make a lot of sense to make a song. Okay, so we're gonna make a drum beat. Let's start with that. So for Cubasis, we're using the left side to add an instrument. You can add an instrument by tapping on the plus sign and adding that instrument immediately. Now I can select between audio or MIDI. It's all based on preference. If you use audio, if you're working with a drum loop or a recording from another application, or you want a audio printout if you freeze out the track. A lot of plugins do use resources, so if you can, maybe print out some stuff into audio in the application. Cubasis has this really cool feature where you can freeze a track, which allows you to convert whatever you do as MIDI or whatever plugins you add directly into an audio printer. It's really useful, so it's worth mentioning. The other one I'd say would be MIDI, which is if I want to enter in the drums manually, or I want to make a MIDI loop, like I downloaded a MIDI loop, or I got a MIDI loop from an application like Beatly Pro or Odyssey, and I wanted that drum pattern in there. So MIDI is good for that level of customization. You can edit the MIDI notes and whatnot. Now for drums, usually Cubasis uses the Microsonic plugin. This is where you can see all the basic instruments with the basic functionality. You can select a drum directly from there, or you can go further into the menu and find the classic machines section. This is where you can use different drum kits in Cubasis. I'll say that for another time because honestly, there's a lot in Cubasis, but it's worth noting. We're gonna make a simple beat directly on Cubasis. And as you guessed it, yes, my playing is not the best. So that's why sometimes I use quantizing. Quantizing allows the stuff to be snapped directly to the grid. Now, once the drums are recorded, I can easily change the kit based on the sounds I had. Like, I can also load a drum plugin to change those information. Since it's MIDI, that's the advantage. I can easily change whatever drum kit or drum sound or plugin I'm using. Once it's audio, I can't do that, but this is where MIDI is really useful. In this case, I'm going to use the Analog 909 from Audio Kit. Okay, so we've added that plugin and it doesn't sound too bad. So we're going to move on to the next one, which is the bass. Now, whenever I get an idea, I start recording and I don't really worry too much about the sound. And this is exactly one of those moments here. If I have a good beat or a good inspiration coming, I try not to think about, oh, I need to do this and I need to do this. It's just whatever idea is there, write it down, and just go from there. So in this case, I just added a MIDI instrument and I played the bass line directly on the piano. I didn't care about the bass sound. I just knew I needed something to sound sort of like a bass. So I used the lower octave, or the lower part of my keyboard, to get a little bit of a bass groove. And then I just recorded it. Not saying it's the only way to record bass on Cubasis, because you can actually connect instruments directly into it and record it as an audio. You could also get bass sounds from other applications here. And of course, you can add in AUV3 plugins. There's a lot of ways to get really good bass sounds in Cubasis. So what I decided to do was I took a copy of that MIDI information and I want to try the inter-app audio feature of Cubasis. So yeah, I actually want to try the inter-app audio and the AUV3 plugin. So I put it into an app like Agonizer and Reason Compact. So Agonizer is an AUV3, Reason Compact is an inter-app audio. I did Agonizer, same way like I did with the drums. I just changed the plugin. That worked. Great. Jakob Ack, great plugin. But then I wanted to try out the actual meat, which is me using an inter-app audio app in Cubasis and see how it responds. So it took a little bit of try and error because I had to actually open up the app first, select the sound I wanted. That is partly the way Reason Compact is designed, but that's also partly the way inter-app audio apps work. So once I opened the application and selected the monotone preset, all I just had to do then was just open up Cubasis and it just played. I was able to play that sound and it worked no problem. This was one of those really surprising features because as a former Garageband user, I'd always have to play out the bass manually and record it to the timeline or do it through the sampler. This time, I don't want to say the app initiates in, but yeah, it worked and it was really, really awesome. But because I wanted to save that sound, hang on one second. This thing's paused for a sec. Okay. But yeah, because I wanted to save that sound, what I did was I froze the tracks and I kept the MIDI hidden. And I rendered out the audio. That way, although the MIDI is still there, the audio track is what's giving the sound. And I don't need to have Reason Compact open, so I can close the application like that. I also then copy pasted that MIDI into another application. That way, I still have, well, mainly because I liked the piano sound, to be honest. That piano was really good. Okay, we're halfway there, and I know the video is a little bit longer than my normal one, so if you're still watching at this point, kudos to you for being awesome. We want to add some melody into this track. And just like with bass lines, there's so many ways to add melodies. You can import a loop, you can play it on your piano, you could drum out the pad in Cubasis, you can add them directly as a pattern, you can import them through MIDI, you could record it if you were playing an instrument like a guitar. There's many ways to do it. There is no right way because it's all based on your mood and your creativity state. So whatever works for you is the best way. You don't need to learn all of them. It's just like you get more tools available. The more you know what your DAW can do, but it should not be a limitation of you to try and tackle and come up with creative ideas. So with adding melody, we can add it using MIDI. And I know I keep saying MIDI, but what MIDI really means, it's just a digital way to represent music. MIDI stands for Musical Instrument Digital Information. And that's it. It's just a way to represent your piano playing or whatever instrument that you're using as a bunch of dots that can be changed with a different instrument in the software. That way you only have to play once and you can experiment with those sounds. Sometimes I do like to make MIDI using other applications. For example, I can use Tonally or apps like Odyssey Chords, Oracle, Beatly Pro. There's a lot of them. What I decided to do this time was use an app called Piano Motives. This one just makes great melodic sequences. So using Piano Motives, I had this really great MIDI sequence and then I shared it directly into Cubasis. This was another really awesome feature of Cubasis because once I shared that MIDI into Cubasis, I could easily access it. And so all I just had to do was just find that folder and drag and drop it into the exact spot, and it worked. I was like, wow, this is awesome. And then I tried using another plugin, which was on my list of favorite synths and favorite plugins I use. Cog Module. I used one of the Cog Module sound presets there. And then I also tried some other presets. I experimented with it. In other words, have fun with your music production. I did have to adjust the volume. This was where I then went into the mixer menu of Cubasis, where I could increase or decrease the volume based on my needs. I could have done it directly in the Cog Module application, but because I'm trying to check out what Cubasis can do, I did it directly in Cubasis. Again, there isn't a right or wrong way on that one. Just do what you feel, because again, it is your music. Whatever song you're making, it's your music. You will learn new ways to use an application, so don't stress too much about it. All right, we're down to the last part of the music production, which is vocals. Now, vocals for me, personally, I feel they tell the story or lack of story. It's one of those things that brings the song to life because you're sharing experiences, you're sharing ideas, you're sharing memes, you're sharing thoughts. Of course, you can share all this stuff using your melody and your drum and your bass line, but I feel a more visual way of telling a story is to tell it, as opposed to a melody that can be interpreted in so many ways. Okay, story time aside. So what we did in this scenario was we recorded the audio by just tapping on audio. In this case, I didn't really have any idea that came to mind, so I just did this as a test recording. And I just recorded that. Once that's done, that's my vocal take. That's it. I could have used a cleaner microphone like this one to record it. I could have got samples from Splice. I could have got vocals from anywhere and put it in the project. But because I wanted to at least test what I could do with Cubasis, I didn't really put too much thought in the vocal. So that's my lack of a story. It's nothing really creative, but it is what it is. It is what it is. So once all these components were recorded, technically my song is done, but I can build it up. Building up a song is where I could do different sound design choices. I could layer stuff. I could arrange it so that it's not the same small snippet of ideas going over and over again. It helps bring character and it helps make your song feel like it's moving as opposed to just being stagnant. So what I did was just select multiple tracks, the tracks that I was working with, and I duplicated and I listened to it. I decided to solo some of the sounds and hear them individually. Would this work? Muted some to listen to it, and then just to get some sort of song structure. And once I did that, that was the final project. So let's give it a listen. Testing 1, 2, 3, 4. This is a test recording with a lot of background vocal. You're gonna see this is gonna work. Testing 1, 2, 3, 4. This is a test recording with a lot of background vocal. You're gonna see this is gonna work. Testing 1, 2, 3, 4. This is a test recording with a lot of background vocal. You're gonna see this is gonna work. Testing 1, 2, 3, 4. This is a test recording with a lot of background vocal. You're gonna see this is gonna work. Okay, so you've got your project done in Cubasis and you want to share it with the world. Well, Cubasis has got you covered. What you can do is you can use the share icon, you can use the iCloud, you can use Dropbox, you can use files, you can use the music library, and you can even export the project. There's many ways to share it. What I'd recommend is if you're sharing a project, keep multiple copies of it. Don't just keep it all in one device. If you have to keep it in the cloud storage or in a USB, that's fine. Try and organize it by name and date and version. Again, this is just more random stuff so that you don't all of a sudden have so many projects and you're unable to keep track of which one's your favorite. But just at least have some sort of organizational structure that at least that way if you want to find your song later, like a few months or a few weeks from now, you're able to easily just find it there.